okay, now that I know what I've got on this basic calendar, do I have the right team in place to execute what's on this calendar? And most of the time, when an advisor has someone on their team that isn't meeting the mark, a lot of times they're just putting it off. My message is act now.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome into Ready, Set, Grow Strategies for Financial Advisors. We're continuing our push about the end of 2024 and preparing for 2025. And I'm not sure there's a better person to be sitting in the opposite chair of me than our sales guru. I was trying to come up with your title, and I was like, I don't know, just nothing fits. It just feels like guru kind of needs to be associated with it. So we'll talk to the IT team about changing your email signature.
Okay.
If that's all right with you.
Sure.
All right, Ant, you're on it. But when we're talking about scaling and growing and how to a financial advisor grow their practice and scale it, the one thing that makes you uniquely qualified to talk about this is your background as more of like a coach, if you will, and kind of being able to see the whole field and kind of instruct advisors about, hey, this is something that you're not seeing. This is how you need to kind of pivot and change. So with that in mind, when we're talking about scaling for the new year, first off, it feels like there's a difference between growing and scaling your practice. What is that difference?
For sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on.
Oh,
and
our pleasure.
Calling me the sales guru.
Hopefully it sticks.
I would call myself maybe the coaching guru.
Okay.
So maybe I'll just change my title.
Okay.
But in terms of scaling and growing for advisors, what we see is growing the practice would be growing the work up to that person's 40 or 50 or sometimes 60 hours that they're working. They're growing their own hours within what they're capable of, and then maybe hire one more person to help take some of the work off of their plate and kind of keep building that out. But ultimately, growing the practice through them is that they're the chief advisor. And scaling a practice is more of creating a business that you can walk away from. I consider growing the practice within that financial professional that they've created a job for themselves, and it's a very meaningful job and a very lucrative job. But what most advisors want when it comes to scaling is being able to take that step back, take that vacation, step away from the practice, play more of that CEO role, and know that when they're away from that practice, that the business still goes on, the business still gets written, and they have then a viable business that they're running versus a practice.
When we talked yesterday, you made that same point of if you're sick and you can't go to work for a week, what happens to your business? Well, for a lot of them, it shuts down.
Nothing does.
Get the boards and nails out. That's a problem.
Yes, it is a problem, and if advisors want to scale and grow and they want a business, that most advisors that we meet want time freedom, and time freedom comes by scaling the practice and creating an amazing foundational team that can run the operations of the practice, and then multiplying their revenue generators by hiring additional sub-advisors within their practice. That's how you can become the CEO or the rainmaker and then achieve more time freedom in your life.
And it's a mindset shift. And before we started rolling, we were talking about your experience working in a bank and working in a business that knew it was a business versus some financial advisors that don't see themselves as a business just yet. And we talked about that light bulb moment of when does that advisor realize, I'm a business. I need to kind of shift. What's that light bulb moment generally?
I mean, most advisors have the light bulb moment in chaos, and
which I love. It makes so much sense. From an analogy perspective, it makes so much sense.
I mean, most of our advisors were amazing salespeople. Some of them came from big institutional corporations or life insurance companies, and they went out on their own, and they're amazing salespeople. And then they got busy. They had so many clients and so much paperwork that they needed to hire an assistant to help them and take that work off of their plate. And they're able to make a great living like that. But eventually, if they want to keep adding 20, 30, 50, 100, some advisors double their practice every year.
Mm-hmm.
That is a completely different model. And so on the way up, generally there becomes this ceiling of complexity that they encounter, which feels like chaos, where themselves and maybe one or two people within the practice, they're recognizing, I need more staff members. I'm not exactly sure how to organize things. I really need an accountant, somebody to help me with my books, somebody to manage these people. And then that's really where a lot of times we come in, where we can help guide them with best practices of what other advisors do and what we've learned over the years about how to stabilize the team that they have, get them the right people in the right seats, and then grow and scale from there of what to do next.
Why is this process a little bit different for using the new year in 2025 as sort of your window of opportunity versus an advisor that wants to grow it in the middle of the calendar year? Why is there a difference?
I mean, I just think that normally we feel like the new year is just this new start.
Mm-hmm.
And August and September are typically like dreaming months. You see what you've done. You've had a couple of quarters to look back on. You understand what you did right, maybe what you could do differently. You're correcting that throughout 2024. And then when that new year comes, you've got to be ready out of the gates to execute. And so it is during these dream months where we're thinking about, this is really what I feel like I could achieve in 2025. And my suggestion is start to act now as if you would from a marketing standpoint, where you're planning your marketing calendar. You're thinking about what it's going to take from a marketing standpoint to get you in front of enough appointments to close the business that you're looking to close next year to grow your firm. I think that we need to think about that from an infrastructure standpoint with just as much vigor as we do our marketing, and making sure that we have the right people and the right seats, and that we have enough people in the practice to be able to help the advisor achieve their goal, because there is nothing harder than trying to achieve a big goal with the wrong team.
That doesn't sound like fun.
No, it doesn't sound like fun. And this is just a great time of year to start thinking, would I rehire every person in my firm? Are these people within their zone of genius? Do they have more room to grow? What else could I have them working on? And really having that, I guess, that level of thought process about the business, as much as we work through the details of marketing and the budget and how much money are we going to spend and what is our profit margin. We've got to think about scaling by team. And maybe this is the year that many advisors want to break out and have that time freedom and hire that sub-advisor.
You glanced against a couple of other talking points. Know your number. We'll say that's a whole rabbit hole for a different day. You also mentioned people being in the right seats.
Mm-hmm.
What's the role of genius? No, what do you say?
Yeah, I call it the zone of genius.
Zone of genius, yeah, which I love. Before we get into some of that stuff, when that advisor wants to start scaling and it means the team needs to grow, what are those first 4 hires generally that you see? And not to say that you need to hire 4 people right out of the gate, but generally, what is kind of the order of operations for how that team gets built out?
Well, if we consider the advisor being the revenue generator,
yep.
You typically have to have, if you have brick and mortar, you typically have to have a director of first impressions, which this is the first person that they talk to, answering the phone, the administrative professional, they're the greeter at the front door. You need to have somebody who's in your client services division, typically based on volume, that's new onboarding clients and servicing your existing clients. And then you've got to have somebody for marketing who can interact with Impact, or, working within the practice to actually execute what Impact is putting together for the marketing plan. So those are really the 4 core areas: sales, marketing, operations, and then administration.
And notably absent from that was a downline advisor, because you don't necessarily see that as the next logical, because we talked about this yesterday. An advisor is growing and they say, well, I need to bring in another guy that can sell. I need to bring in somebody else.
Yeah.
And you say, whoa, not so fast.
I asked them, you know that advisor is just going to create more paperwork and more leads and more administrative work. Can your team handle that? And that's really where you see the light bulb go off,
Yeah,
because
yep.
the advisor's like, well, my team can't handle the paperwork that they have now.
Nope.
Or, we feel
Yeah.
chaotic now, or we might be dropping leads or unable to resurrect our cold leads from our database. Those are the types of things that we want to solve for before we start hiring additional revenue generators, so that when you bring in that revenue generator, nothing gets dropped.
I know a role that you have filled here at Impact is helping advisors build out that team and the actual hiring process and finding talent. And I know that that is not an easy process. And something that was pointed out to me was those words written on the wall outside here at Impact, they're not just buzzwords. They are values that actually have value assigned to them. And if you are trying to grow your team, how important is it to define your company's core values before you start fielding candidates?
Yeah, I could give you a long answer to that. But
Give me a medium answer. Give me a medium answer.
My recommendation is that culture is everything. When we ask advisors, what are some of the things that you would want people to have in your firm, the answers, like the characteristics, the answers are rarely skill related. They're almost always culture or attitude related. And so as an entrepreneur, you really want to settle on 4 to 6 core values that really, from a behavioral standpoint, depict the type of people that you want to join your firm. And that will help you get the right people in the right seats. We have a set of core values here that we hire and fire based on. And originally, when we started the company, we had a set of core values, but over the 13 years or 12 years, because we changed them about a year ago, we were using words to describe success, things like grit, get it done mindset, coachable. And we decided to revamp our core values to align with the way that we were measuring success. So this isn't a difficult exercise. You have an idea typically in your firm of what you believe is success, and that you would want the characteristics of the people that you hire to align with when you bring them on. And those really are core values, things that are important to you.
I had I guess a bit of a hot take, but I guess I'll defer to you on when you're coming up with these values. What's your stance on saying fun? Is fun a good value to hire and fire based off of? Or does an advisor need to look a little bit deeper and ask themselves, do I really want people that are fun, or do I want people that are hardworking?
I think it depends on the spirit of your firm and how you want your clients to feel when they walk through the door. And we have some advisors who want their clients to feel like they're at home. They have their front lobby set up like a living room, and everything seems like family. And they have pictures of their clients with their families on a cork board. And then you have others where they have, the stock market on television when their clients walk in. It just depends on the feel of the firm. And if fun is one of the things that the advisor is founded on, I think you'd have to be really detailed about what that probably means.
Okay, very diplomatic of you.
About what fun really means, but is that really getting a job done? When the client goes home and you're working within your firm to deliver on that client expectation, and deliver on the sales process to get the firm paid, what are the characteristics then, talking about going deeper, would you want that person to have?
When we talked yesterday, you went through the team development guide with me briefly, which is something we offer here at Impact for advisors that are coming on board and advisors that are with us. And it really, columns, lanes, keeping people in it. But what jumped out, it was eye-opening from my perspective seeing it for the first time. I imagine a lot of advisors are seeing something like that for the very first time. But it was all about really, in detail, going through, hey, these are the jobs, these are the tasks, and circle it and find out where, what's being circled and who's doing what. And
Mm-hmm.
are people in the right seat? Why is that such an eye-opening experience for advisors?
Yeah. So over the years in coaching advisors, we really have 3 areas of a practice: operations, marketing, and sales. So what I did is I broke down every possible job that could be hired at a practice.
It was very meticulous.
It
I'll
was.
point that out. Very
It was
meticulous.
very meticulous. From so many times of helping advisors know who they were going to hire next. And a quick sidebar to that is a lot of times advisors would call me and say, "Oh, I need to hire somebody. Okay, what are you going to have that person do?" Well, I don't really know. I know what my current person is doing. Okay, are they good at that? Do you really know kind of what I like to call the 4 corners of what they're doing?
Yep.
Would you be able to recite their job? And the answer was 90% of the time, no. And what I found a lot of my advisors in a position of is something called key role dependency, where they have one person. They don't know what the person's really doing day to day. They just know that they're solving all these things that the advisor doesn't want to do anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And if that person, we call it the yellow bus, they were to get hit by the yellow bus on the way home, that advisor would not have any idea or a reference point to go back to of all the things that that person was picking up along the way. So I designed this guide. In the initial design was so that advisors could see, okay, if you're in administration, you're a greeter at the front door, like these are the things that person needs to be assigned. And then client services. And I went on into leadership as well for each of those sections.
Yep.
And it's good because when advisors say, I want to hire that next person, I never say, okay, let's do it. What I like to do is run advisors through this team development guide.
Yep.
And just have them see, okay, this person in your office who's supposed to be doing client services, what else are they doing?
Mm-hmm.
And then once we identify where the skill set, the greatest level of natural skill set is for those people, then we make sure that they're doing everything that are in those swim lanes, if you will.
Yep.
And then it's very clear then what is missing. So what's missing here is I thought that my person that I had hired was supposed to be doing marketing, but they're also doing a ton of client services as well, and they're answering the phone and they're overwhelmed. Okay, well, probably because they're doing 4 jobs.
Yep.
So that really helps us to narrow down what do we hire next, and here's the exact things that they need to be doing, which really helps in building the job description process as well.
And how important is it to make sure that the people that you already have on your team are in the right seat? In a game of musical chairs, kind of move them around. When you do that team development guide and you see, well, someone's initials are way over here and they need to be over here.
Yeah.
When we're to bring it back to that new year and scaling and adding to the team, those hard questions, hard conversations that need to be had with perhaps existing team members about whether or not they are in the right seat, if they are in their zone of genius.
Yeah. I think that most advisors and business owners know when they have somebody on their team that is not in their zone of genius. And maybe it's because they don't align with the values and they shouldn't be at the firm. But most of the time, they're just spread across multiple different jobs. Some of them one of them they're naturally good at, and the others that they're not. And so sometimes that could jade the advisor's view of them, thinking that they're not being successful when the advisor doesn't maybe realize that they're doing 4 things as the marketing coordinator and 5 things as the marketing manager and things with the client services. And so it's very hard for them to really hone in on one particular job. My opinion is that your first team in a practice should be the best possible team ever, because those are the people who will train anyone else that you hire.
Yep.
So those first couple of hires are extremely important, even if you have to pay more, that they are a complete cultural fit, a perfect cultural fit, and that they have the skills to execute and be an expert at either operations or marketing. And marketing is sales in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So having more of a sales-minded person in that role and having an administrative-minded person in an operations role is really, really important. And then as you begin to add on, then those 2 people will train all the rest of the people based on what their role is. Besides sales, obviously the chief advisor would train that person.
Sort of, not necessarily the elephant in the room, but one big component of when you want to scale and scaling for the new year, and I'll try and get you out of here on this, is the need for that advisor to kind of forecast down the road what they want this next year to look like. And that needs to happen before January 1st. They need to have these goals and these numbers ahead of time. Why is forecasting and what does an advisor need to be looking for when they forecast to see what they're looking for to scale their practice for the new year?
Well, it needs to happen before October 1st. That's really important, because typically our first iteration may not be the final iteration of what they're going to do, but it typically takes 6 to 8 weeks to set up a seminar and to be able to execute. And so forecasting the marketing is the most important thing, because it's volume that would drive the need for hires, which we've talked a lot about. So you want to forecast that marketing so that you understand your budget, you understand your spend, your commitment, and then thinking about, okay, now that I know what I've got on this basic calendar, do I have the right team in place to execute what's on this calendar? And within that plan, you're going to look at what went well, what needs to change. And most of the time, when an advisor has someone on their team that isn't meeting the mark, a lot of times they're just putting it off. My message is act now, because it takes hire slow. So even if that takes 2 months and you can't get someone in place until the middle of October or November, they will have at least 6 weeks to onboard before you are hitting the ground running come January 1st. So August and September are your dream months. You need to have something in pencil before October 1st, and you need to be thinking about what, from a people and resources standpoint, is everybody on your team in their zone of genius? If not, let's go through the team development guide and help you figure that out. Can they do more? Are they busy with meaningful work to do 40 plus hours a week? And then, do you need to hire? And if so, what role would be that role that would best help to catapult you, launch you into the opportunity to really execute on that 2025 plan that you and your marketing CMO have put together for your year. So don't wait. We're not waiting till January 1st to come up with this plan. Also, one more thing to add.
Okay, one more thing here.
One more thing. I love one more thing. When you pencil in your plan and you start thinking about it, once you get it in pen, you got to meet with your team.
Okay.
That is a huge part of it, is meeting with the team, because especially if you're going to be moving people's roles around and reconcentrating people, like having everybody on board, this looks like a 1-day kind of offsite with your team and getting them geared up for that plan for 2025. So you're not going into it blind.
Yep.
It's one team, one dream, and making sure that you're sharing plans with that core team along the way.
Coach Guru, thank you very much for this. This was enlightening.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
A wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure that we'll probably have you back on the podcast again, and we'll keep punching the punch cards, and you'll get that free sub for your 5th podcast.
Okay.
So
I would
there's something to
really
look
enjoy
forward
that.
to.
I like pub subs, so.
Okay, noted. Ready, Set, Grow on our YouTube channel, Impact Partnerships YouTube channel, also on there, House Rules with Alex House, Selling with Stories with Randy Cook, all great resources for an advisor to grow their practice, and hopefully you learned something today, just like
Hey, thanks for having me.
I learned something today.